Hello, we're going to start by looking at how to draw a button and imply depth, 3 dimensions. I'm going to start off by resetting my workspace, Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials Classic. So I'm using the Essentials Classic workspace, which I would suggest you do if you're following this video, just so we're literally on the same page. So I'm going to use my graphic primitive, the ellipse. I'm going to hold down the Option key to draw from center and the Shift key to constrain to a circle. I'm going to remove the stroke, and for the fill I'm going to use a gradient. I've got my color panel here. I'm just going to expand that. And I've also got access to my gradient panel. Now, I'm just going to start by filling this in with a base color. I'll use a smaller circle for my buttonhole. Again, hold the Shift key down. I'll just do this in a different color just so we can see it. I want to hold down the Option key and the Shift key. The Option key makes a copy. The Shift key constrains movement in one direction. I initiated my movement in a horizontal direction, so it's constrained that way. Release all my keys, hold down the Shift key to select this one, release the Shift key, then hold down the Option key. Keep in mind, for those who are using Windows-based platforms, the Option key is the Alt key. Select those, hold down the Shift key, select all 4 of those circles. I'm just going to group them together. Object, group. So this allows this to behave like a single object. This allows me now to just drag a marquee, select the background red circle and the 4 smaller circles, and then use my alignment functions. Align them on the mutual centers and the horizontals, and we've got this. Now they're perfectly aligned. While they're both selected, I'm now going to use the Shape Builder tool, and that allows us to create new compound shapes from the addition or subtraction of shapes from one another. In this case, I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key on a PC, and this allows me to subtract areas. Just like that. So there's my basic button. Now I'm going to make 3 copies of this. Option. I'm just going to offset the 3 of them, and I'm going to make this background button black. Not just any black, but rich black. A black that contains cyan, magenta, yellow, and monochrome or grayscale black. This gives you a much richer color that will blend much better, give you better shadow details when you use the appearance panel or the transparency panel to give this an opacity and a blend mode of multiply. I'm just going to make 1 more copy, and this top copy we're going to apply a gradient to. So currently we've got a grayscale gradient. There's some default gradients in there that we can use as well, and I'm just going to use this grayscale one, and I want it to be radial for now. I just want to alter the colors, but you'll notice that black that's being used is monochrome, grayscale. How do I convert this back to CMYK? Well, I select here in the drop-down accordion menu and re-establish CMYK as my color space. This allows me to alter the color, and then if I want, I can hold the Option key down, just drag to here, make that a darker red, and drag this again, make a copy. I'm holding Option or Alt. Maybe make that a little bit darker. So just add in some black. So we're sculpting the look of highlight and shadow. I'm using the Option key just to copy that. And I've got what looks to be a three-dimensional button. Now, the red one here, I'm going to make a darker red, so add more black in. And what I want to do is make enough of an offset here so that the button looks as if it's three-dimensional. You can see there. There it has dimensionality. And now this black one's going to create our shadow. So I just offset that, not too much, because remember, the button is going to be very close to the fabric. So I select it, and then I'm going to use my appearance panel, or I could use my transparency panel, either one. And for the fill of that object, I can set its opacity, set the blend mode to multiply, set the opacity percentage to about 35%, and then you can see here that I've got this shadow detail. Now I'm going to select that shadow element and I'm going to apply a special effect. So in the effects menu, I'm going to choose a blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to blur it by a few pixels. Too much blur makes the button look like it's hovering too high above the material. Remember, blur signals two things. One, the distance of the object from the background. So the further away the object is from the background, the fuzzier the shadow edges will be. The second thing it signals is the material properties of the background. If it's very hard, smooth surface, the shadow edges will be fairly crisp. If it's a very textured surface, that texture will scatter the light, causing the edge of the shadow to be blurry as well. So I do want a little bit of blur. I'm going to put in about 5 pixels worth of blur. And so far I've constructed my button. I now want to put the threads on there. And I just need a simple line. It's going to draw it from here to here. I'll give it some stroke. So no fill. And we'll give it stroke. You better choose a color for that. So let me open up my color panel. And I'll choose a nice complementary green. I'm going to make it fairly dark green. Now you'll notice here in the appearance panel, I'm just going to make this a little bit thicker from the appearance panel, and I'll click the stroke menu and give the stroke a rounded cap. And that gives a nice round edge to what would be the thread. I'm going to duplicate the stroke in the appearance menu. It's pretty straightforward. You just click this button right here and it duplicates the stroke. The stroke on top I'm going to make slightly lighter. So here's the color panel. I'm going to make it slightly lighter and slightly thinner. Let me make it a little bit thinner. But you'll notice you don't see any difference. That's because they have the same color. But let me lighten this. The easiest way to do that, in your color sliders, hold the Shift key down and it moves all your sliders simultaneously. And now we have this. So it looks like we have highlight and shadow on our thread. Now I could click here. This is our graphic styles area. Select that and drag it into there, and that's now saved as a style. The nice thing about a style is, if let's say I make a copy of that, Option drag, that's great. It just duplicates it. But if I were to draw something new, I can just click here on that style and it automatically applies it to the stroke. Make sure I have that selected and then Option, drag, and just offset it. It's looking a little too perfect, so maybe I'll alter the endpoints, make them slightly different. And there we have a button. It's made up of 3 component parts. Think of it like an Oreo cookie. You have the 2 outside pieces and the yummy center filling. The top piece carries your gradient with your highlight and shadow. The center piece is the darker version of the button's main color theme to give you that extruded depth when it's slightly offset. And slightly offset again is a rich black consisting of cyan, magenta, yellow, and grayscale black. And it is set to a blend mode of multiply in the appearance panel or transparency panel, and then an opacity of 35%, and then a slight blur, Gaussian blur of around 5 pixels, what I've used there. The amount of blur is contingent on distance and material properties of the base that will be holding the shadow. And that's your button. There it is. It's ready to go on your Hawaiian shirt.